Good morning, Professor.
How are you?
Fine. How are you?
Long time no see. I feel like.
Yes.
Anything special? Nothing special? No? No? Okay. How was other class midterm?
We have 2 reports still this week,
Uh,
but we have no exam, only reports.
yeah.
Hello, Professor. Good morning.
Good morning. Show yourself, Carly. Okay. So, how was your last week?
I have just one midterm report to
Just
submit.
midterm report.
Yeah,
Kind of same as Manar. Do you know
yeah,
Manar?
yeah. I
Oh,
know.
okay. I guess you're in the lab.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm in the lab.
And then I guess there's no one.
Yeah, Professor. No one coming.
Yeah. I mean, it's very early time. Do you have your in your lab also having a specific time for the working hours?
9 to 6. It's like as normally, but someone come in around 10 or 11 and they stay at midnight.
Mm-mm. So do you work hard?
But I
But as a graduate student, it's not only about learning something through the class, but I guess most of your time is for doing something in your research. So you have to be actually having a two functions. One is learning something as a student. The other one is doing work as a researcher. So making a balance for that is not actually sometimes easy. Hi Noor,
Hello, Professor.
I missed you. How are you?
I miss you too. Fine.
Okay. So I mean, we all know that in Dasan building we had a kind of COVID-19 patient. So because of that, we closed for one day. But even after one day, seems like we are more paying attention to be safe from COVID-19. And also, I heard that in the building of the life science, there, I don't know whether they had a patient or they had a kind of very close contact with a patient outside. But I also heard the life science building has been also closed for, I don't know, one day like that. And then even the main, administration building at GIST, they, in that building, the research kind of management team section, I think they also stayed at home to work for one day because of that maybe very close contact with the patient. So now GIST is not a kind of holy, place anymore from the COVID-19. We all have a high chance to get the COVID-19. So, Jill, how are you?
Good morning, Professor.
Okay. And then Seungyeong, long time no see. How are you?
Professor.
I miss you. Yeah, you need to show yourself more often. So I feel like, I mean, even though it was only 1 week last week that we didn't see each other, but I feel like it has been a month. So I guess we are all here, so I can start. I plan to have other students' presentation next week. However, next Tuesday, I will be also in Seoul, and also the following Tuesday, I will also be in Seoul. So basically May 4th and May 11th, I will be in Seoul for the evaluating the project. So basically I will record the video and then I will upload to YouTube as I did before. I don't know whether you are really having a chance to go back to the YouTube and then watch again, but I hope you do. But because it is actually a little bit complicated for the uploading the lecture to the YouTube because of the kind of copyright issue. As you can see from my materials, some are actually from the textbook and some are from the maybe YouTube or maybe from the Google search image and those. So unless I get the kind of permission from the publisher of the textbook or the owner of the picture or the video, then I actually should not upload to the YouTube. So that is the reason why I change from the public view to the kind of hidden. So I will basically make it all video to be open. Maybe I don't know, 1 month before the final exam, so that you have enough time to go back and then watch all the previous lectures. But before then, I will make it to be private, and then other people cannot watch. However, one thing I can do is I can make it as a kind of the viewable with a link. So I can send the link to all of you. Then you can actually visit and then you can click the link and you can view the lecture. So that is another possibility that we can do. Okay, let's start. Which one is which one? Not this one. This one. Sorry, again, this one. Okay. So as I mentioned, this table is kind of important table. And then this 60 Celsius degree coagulation occurs, which is important. Vaporization, carbonization, melting, tissue damage. And most of that thermal interaction by the light with the tissue is because of the water vibration in our tissue. That is also one important part. And then we have been looking at the heat generation model. And then heat loss is throughout the like H3 mechanism. However, we can ignore convection or radiation. We only need to consider about the conduction of the heat. The heat transport water. And this is also important kind of concept. So thermal penetration depth. So by definition, this thermal penetration depth is the distance when the temperature drops to 1/E of its peak value. So this is actually very same as the penetration depth of the light. So when we assume that the tissue has only absorption, and then when you have the tissue, and then when you are basically shining the light from the top, this will penetrate to the tissue. However, when you are looking at this in terms of the intensity, the surface of the tissue will have a highest intensity, which is the I sub 0. And then this intensity reduces as they are traveling in the tissue. And then when you look at the 1/E point, which is about 37% of I sub 0, that corresponds to this point. And this point was considered as a penetration depth of the light in the tissue. When there is a mu s prime, then we need to consider both of them, which is the mu t. So total attenuation coefficient. So in that case, the change of the light intensity throughout the direction of the z will be actually very similar pattern as this, except that the slope of this is basically mu sub t, not the mu sub a. So anyway, the thermal penetration depth means that when you are giving the light to the tissue surface, the tissue surface will, you can imagine, will have a highest absorption of the light on the surface, so that they will basically generate highest amount of the heat. Ji-hoon, I forgot you are in the class. So we already started. You need to just kind of follow. So that the heat will be generated on the surface of tissue, so that temperature actually will also occur to be the highest at the surface. And then because of that conduction of the heat throughout the tissue, which is depending on heat capacity, and then kind of thermal diffusivity also. Those are basically making how fast the heat will be transferred from the surface to the deep tissue. So if you look at the heat, basically or temperature change along with this g-axis, this temperature will be highest at the surface, and also it will drop down. And then if you look at the 1/E point, which is the 37 point from the surface, then this depth is also called as a thermal penetration depth, and we are using as a Z term. So by looking at this, the definition of both penetration, either optical penetration or thermal penetration, the definition is same between those two. Basically, they are looking at the 1/E point from the highest temperature or highest light intensity. And then the issue is this is basically having a time dependence. Light is, super fast, probably the fastest that we know. So light is so fast. So when you turn on, that immediately basically travel to the distance of the Z. However, for the heat, it takes time. You first need to have a process of the absorption of the light. That can be kind of quick. However, after being observed, after observing the light energy, and then you need to have a time to those energy to be dissipated as a heat. And for that process, it takes some time. So most of cases, the temperature rising time is much longer compared with the light traveling speed in the tissue. So if you are giving very fast or very short time of the light pulse, if you give the continuous wave light, they basically just continuously illuminating the light to the tissue, then it gives enough time to generate heat in the tissue, and then the heat will be basically traveling along the tissue. However, you can imagine that if you are giving very short pulse, such as less than microsecond, then the light was given to the tissue by less than 1 microsecond. And then if the heat propagation along the tissue takes more longer than microsecond, then what happened is that those generated heat in the tissue doesn't have enough time to go to the other place of tissue because light pulse is already up at that time. So heat has been generated and then they want to be transferred to the other tissue, but you stop the energy source at that time already. So that those heat doesn't actually have enough time to be transferring to other area. It's a little bit different. We need to actually make a separate consideration because the light, so we are giving the light to the tissue, and then it will be depending on the energy of the light also, so that when you are giving high enough energy, so that the tissue will be basically, so in this case, higher than 100 Celsius degree, so that there will be basically all the water will be vaporized, and then even more higher, then melt down, and then basically they will be evaporated. For this one, let's say we are giving the light to make the heat to be only 60 Celsius degree. In this case, the tissue will stay there. It will not be evaporated, but it will be coagulated. So you're basically making the tissue here to be coagulated, not removed from the position. This one, you give high light energy so that the tissue here has been basically evaporated, it's gone. So why I mentioned here is that for the right side case, in this case, if you are giving light just enough to generate around 60 Celsius degree and then stop, then tissue will be there, and then the heat generated in this area, they will have a chance to transfer to surrounding tissue. But you can imagine that since we generated only around 60 Celsius degree, so that the transfer heat to the surrounding tissue will be also lower than this one. And probably it may not cause significant damage to the surrounding tissue. The left case, we gave high light energy, so that generating very high temperature, and then basically removing tissue here. So the best case is that we remove only this area, and then the other area surrounding here to be basically not damaged at all. But if you are giving long enough pulse of the light, then the heat generated in this area will have sufficient time to travel along the surrounding tissue. Then, since this original area had a very high temperature, so that transferred heat to the surrounding tissue will be also having high temperature, and then they can cause the damage to the surrounding tissue. But for the left case, if you are giving very short time, a short pulse time, such as the less than 1 microsecond, then what happens is that the light energy has been delivered to this area sufficient enough to remove the tissue. However, it was short enough so that generated heat in this area doesn't have time to transfer to the surrounding tissue, so that surrounding tissue is kept as safe. But if you are giving longer pulse time, then because you are giving enough time for those tissue to allow the heat generated in this area to be transferring to the surrounding tissue, so that it can cause the surrounding tissue to be damaged. So that's the key point between the time that you are giving the light and the time that those heat transfer from the heat deposited area to the surrounding tissue. And the thermal relaxation time is the time that basically how long it takes for the temperature at depth G to reach one of the temperature at G is 0. So it's actually same as the thermal penetration depth, except that it is looking at the time. So you look at the time, and then you look at the temperature. And then you have a tissue, and then you have a light comes, and then it will be transferred into the tissue, and then the heat will be generated from the surface to the depth of the tissue. And then you look at the one point here at the depth of the Z. So you measure temperature at the depth of the Z, which is the graph on here. Of course, it will be basically some maybe 37 Celsius degree. And then with the time, it start to increase the temperature. And then it will go away. So initially, the temperature here is going to be our body temperature. So 37. And then when you are measuring the temperature with the time, as the light is on, here, then the light will be penetrating to the tissue, and the heat generated from the surface will start to also transfer to the depth of the tissue. So that when you are watching the temperature here at this point, then it start to rise, and then it will reach the maximum, and then it will go down. And then let's say you had a temperature here as maybe 100 Celsius degree, and then the 1/E temperature is going to be 37 Celsius degree. That doesn't make sense because it's already 37 Celsius degree. So let's say this is the maybe 200, and then it will be about 74 Celsius degree. So you measure temperature at the 74 Celsius degree. So when they are reaching to the 74 Celsius degree, then this time is called as a thermal relaxation time. So this thermal relaxation time is giving an indication of how long it takes for the heat to travel to the distance of the Z. So if you have a short thermal relaxation time, that means that the heat will be transferred to the tissue quickly. If you have a long thermal relaxation time, it is slow for the heat to transfer to the other area. So basically this thermal interaction time is giving how fast it will acquire temperature or heat, or how fast it will also lose the heat. So both heat conduction and the heat dissipation will be depending on the thermal relaxation time. So if all the process, when we are using the light, and then if the event happen much quicker than the relaxation time, then we can ignore thermal diffusion. So basically, when you have a thermal relaxation time as maybe 2 microseconds, and then if you are giving the light with a shorter than 2 microseconds, then the thermal diffusion can be kind of ignored. So thermal relaxation time, and then this graph shows that for the water, thermal relaxation time is around 1 microsecond at the 3 micrometer. So that's why there is 1 microsecond rule when you are using the laser and then for the tissue. So if you have a shorter than 1 microsecond as a light pulse, then you can minimize the thermal damage to the surrounding tissue. But if you have a longer than 1 microsecond, then you are going to give some damage to the surrounding tissue when you are doing the laser therapy. And then this shows the two cases when the tau is smaller than 1 microsecond. such as the nanosecond or picosecond pulse, then the heat diffusion can be actually ignored because the time is much shorter than the 1 microsecond. So in that case, if you assume the laser intensity is kind of constant throughout the laser pulse time, then the SRZT, which is the heat generated, is going to be depending on absorption coefficient of the alpha and the light intensity. So the temperature at the tissue surface is going to be depending on whether the time is shorter than tau or during the pulse or after pulse of the light. So during the laser pulse, the temperature is rising with the initial temperature and also linearly with the time. After you stop the pulse, then the temperature will go down, and then they will be depending on the maximum temperature acquired from this time, and then it slowly reduce with the function of the tau and also the t. So here Tmax is the maximum increase in the temperature. So if you plot the previous equation, then it can be shown as like this. So when you have a 100 nanosecond pulse, the temperature rise quickly depending on the light energy. And then when you stop the pulse, the temperature will decay with a function of this. But for the second case, if you are giving the pulse to be longer than 1 microsecond, in that case, you need to consider heat diffusion so that heat will be generated in the area of the light illumination, and then it will have enough time to diffuse or to transfer to the surrounding tissue so that surrounding normal tissue will be also having affected by the temperature, by the heat. In that case, it's not easy to have an analytical solution for the heat conduction equation, so that you have to apply the numerical solutions such as the finite differences or recursion algorithm. They are actually kind of very similar each other. So by looking at this numerical simulation or the solutions, it shows the temperature change for the longer than 1 microsecond. So here you gave the laser for like 10 minutes, and then you can see the temperature rising, and then you stop light, and then it goes down. So those can be simulated by using the numerical solutions. And then we were showing about some examples of the treatment by using the thermal interaction. So Port-Weinstein PWS is basically the enlargement of the microvessel diameter in the skin, so that because of the microvessel is enlarged and there are too many of the microvessels, so that it will have a high blood volume, and then basically it will be shown as a reddish color, as you can see from this example. And the one way to treat the Port-Weinstein is using the laser. So by using the laser, you basically coagulate a microvessel on the this face skin, but you need to keep other blood vessel to be safe, right? So that can be done by applying selective photothermal lysis using the laser at the 577 nanometer. As you can see in this structure figure, there is epidermis of the skin, which is very thin layer, and it has a melanin. And then in the depth of 300 to 600 micrometer, which is belonging to the dermis area, you can see the blood vessels. So there are blood vessels. In the normal case, those blood vessels are microvessel, so that the diameter is 10 to 30 micrometer. But for those purtwine stain case, they have a enlarged blood vessel, so that diameter is like 200 micrometer. So that is the issue. So the key point is that how we can basically coagulate only this, but keeping the other normal microvessels. So that is the question. So one thing people found is that by controlling the time between each pulse, and then they can make a coagulation of this large blood vessel, but keeping the small blood vessel. That is because of the thermal relaxation time is different between those two blood vessels. People found that for the blood vessel, which is having a shape of the cylinder, so the thermal relaxation time of the blood vessel with the cylinder shape depends on this, d squared over 16 kappa. So kappa is thermal diffusivity, which is the same between those two blood vessels. However, there is a difference in terms of the diameter. So that thermal relaxation time is depending on square of the diameter. So when you have a larger diameter of the blood vessel, then thermal relaxation time increases, square of that difference. So that means for the large blood vessel, you have a long thermal relaxation time. Small blood vessel, you have a short thermal relaxation time. So what that means? That means that when you give the light to the blood vessel and then generating heat within the blood vessel, the small blood vessel will have a very short time to release the heat. But this large blood vessel will have a slow heat transfer. And by using that difference, you can treat purtwine stain. So when you are giving the pulse with a high power, with a short heating pulse, then you say this is the critical temperature, which means that you need to have a higher than this temperature to coagulate those blood vessels. So in this case, you are giving high enough energy or high enough temperature for both, so that both of them will be coagulated. If you are giving very long pulse and then but with a low power, then both of them will be under that critical temperature. But if you are giving between those two, in that case, you are giving enough temperature for the large blood vessel, but not for the small blood vessel, so that you can coagulate only large blood vessel, but keeping the small blood vessel to be safe. And then actually I was showing this video at the time, but when I checked the video recorded, I found that there was no sound. So I think I can try this. And then just let me know when. Can you hear the music now? No?
There are two important points.
Sorry, did you hear the voice? Yes? No? Yes?
No.
Oh, Seung-young, you couldn't hear? But others said yes.
We can hear it, but it is not clear.
Okay. So basically, I will explain with the video. So this one is showing the mechanism of how the laser can remove the hair. So it shows about the thermal conduction time. And the thermal conduction time is the rate that the substance absorbs heat. Thermal relaxation time is basically how fast the heat will be dissipated in the tissue. So for the laser hair remover, so thermal conduction time is basically giving that how fast the temperature is increased. Here, oops. So thermal conduction time is, oops, I cannot use the pen actually. So okay, maybe I will just use the mouse. So thermal conduction time means that how fast the temperature rise with the time, and the thermal relaxation time is opposite. So that when the temperature is risen at some certain temperature, how fast the temperature is going down. So that is the thermal relaxation time. So actually those thermal conduction time and the thermal relaxation time, the relationship is basically opposite each other. So if you have a very short thermal conduction time or fast thermal conduction time, then it will rise very quickly. But that means that the heat will be also dissipated very quickly. So when you are giving the laser pulse to the tissue, the temperature in the tissue will start to rise. And then this thermal conduction time will basically represent how fast the tissue will have a temperature or heat absorption. And then when you stop the light, thermal relaxation time means that how fast the tissue will lose the heat, so that temperature will go down. So the thermal relaxation time is inverse with the thermal conduction time. So this is the structure of the skin. So you have a epidermis area, and you can see those black dots here, and those are representing the melanin granule. And then you have a hair follicle, and you can see those microvessels through the to the direction of the skin surface. And then there are fats, and the muscle will be under here. So here, when you're giving the laser, that's not only targeting the hair, which is the purpose of this treatment, but they will also hit the melanin on the skin. So both hair follicle and the melanin are having, kind of black color, dark color. So that if you just don't consider about the first time, then actually you are giving the light effect on both of melanin granule here and also hair follicle. So that means that you cannot only remove the hair follicle by giving the high temperature rising here, but you can also give damage to the skin itself because of melanin. So as you can see in this example, so the left one is showing the hair thermal conduction time, and the right side is showing the skin thermal conduction time due to the melanin. And then the dotted red line are showing the temperature that we want to achieve so that hair follicle can be removed. But with the same temperature, the time that reaching to that temperature, hair takes much longer, and the skin, it takes very quick. So that's the problem, because before giving the enough temperature to the hair, you have already enough temperature on the skin first. That means that you are going to damage skin even before removing the hair. So that's the problem. So when you give the laser, hair can reach very quickly, but skin, but hair is not. So it shows that melanin in the hair follicle is the primary target for the hair removal procedure. And the melanin on the skin is a problem because we can burn skin before burning the hair. So when you're giving the laser, it will both generate heat in the melanin here and also hair follicle. But we can use the difference between those hair and the melanin in terms of the heat conduction time. So for the lighter color skin, it has a very low amount of the melanin, so that for the skin, the temperature doesn't rise so much, so that you can actually give a laser so long enough for the hair to observe the light energy and then reaching to the temperature. But skin, in this case, doesn't have a very high amount of the melanin, so that the temperature doesn't rise so much. And then you can use the very simple laser treatment and then remove the hair. But there is a challenge when you have a darker skin type. And then because skin also has a high amount of the melanin, so that when you are giving the laser, it will make both hair and also skin to rise the temperature. And then even more problem because the skin temperature increase is much faster than the hair. So people were adapting the pulse of the laser, and then between each pulse giving some time. And then by having that way, you can have a selective treatment. So when you give the laser pulse and then stop, then you can see here it increased temperature this much. And when you stop, it has a long thermal relaxation time. So it's slowly going down temperature. But for the skin, it has a very short thermal conduction time. So it rises fast. However, also it reduces fast. And then if you are giving enough time, then the heat in the skin will be almost going back to the baseline temperature. and then you are giving another pulse. And then you can see that skin temperature went back to the baseline and they just quickly rise up. But for the hair case, because of the slow thermal relaxation time, so that the temperature did not go back to the baseline temperature. It was still in the some level of temperature. So at this moment, if you are giving another laser pulse, then they will adding the temperature from this point to the top point here. And then if you're repeating this multiple times, then skin will have a no effect, but hair will have a high enough temperature so that it can be damaged. So that is the mechanism of how you can use the laser pulse duration time, and also between laser pulse duration time, you can control specific the target to be damaged by the laser. So which is same as this Fort-Weinstein temperature, Fort-Weinstein treatment case. Here, this is a little bit, it can make kind of confusion because here it shows only pulse like that, long heating pulse, longer heating pulse, short heating pulse, but it's not actually talking about the pulse itself, but they are looking at the duration time. So if you are giving short duration time and then long duration time or like that, then this can happen. Wait, I can draw. So basically, you have seen in the hair remover case that when you are giving the pulse, then this small blood vessel will have a quick rise, and the large blood vessel will have a slower rise. And then if you stop laser pulse, it will go back quicker, but it will slowly like that. So if you're giving very short duration time, at the top is short duration. So before it goes down and then you're giving another pulse, then it will rise. And then it will rise like that. So that both of them can be actually having high temperature so that it will be coagulated. But if you are giving long duration between pulse, so you turn on and then you wait for second pulse for the long time, then it goes back and then it also goes back, both cases, so that both of them will not be damaged. But if you're controlling the duration time between the top and bottom, then you can make the pulse and then you can make the duration stop, waiting until this one goes back, but this will be somewhere here. And then if you're giving the laser again, goes up and it goes up and it stop, and then goes back and goes back here. And then turn on laser and then stop and then goes back here. So that by controlling the duration time, as you have seen in the hair remover case, you can selectively increase temperature in the large blood vessel compared with the small blood vessel. so that you can keep the small blood vessel, but you can coagulate large blood vessel. So that's how laser can treat porcupine stain or removing the hair. And the pulse repetition rate is actually also very important, how fast you are repeating the pulse. That actually represents the between each pulse, the duration time between the pulse. That is representing the pulse repetition rate. So this is the basically same as the previous one. So when you are giving the picosecond pulse, then it doesn't cause the thermal damage. But if you are giving very fast repetition time, then it can give the temperature accumulation, and then it can have a high enough temperature to melt down the tissue. So now this is the very important step. So now we can actually estimate how much of the temperature will increase when you are doing the laser treatment. So look at the initial conditions. So you are having pulse, laser pulse, and that energy is about 3 microjoule. And then that is observed within the tissue volume of 1000 micrometer cube, which is the 1000 microliter. And then it contains, let's say, 80% of the water. So in this example, you can estimate how much of the water in this tissue. So amount of tissue, amount of water will be about 800 because total volume is 1000, and then you have 80% water. So you have 800 micrometer cube, which corresponding to 8 times 10 to minus 10 gram of the water in the tissue volume of 1000 micrometer cube. So the goal is, what will be the final temperature when you are giving the pulse with the 3 microjoule energy? So when you give the laser pulse, there are 3 steps can happen. Garlic. So can you read this?
Initial condition, pulse energy 3 microjoule is absorbed within tissue
So
body.
I was asking, reading this part.
Oh,
3
okay.
steps. Okay.
Okay, 3 steps. Okay. Heat the tissue up to 100 degrees centigrade Celsius and transfer energy to vaporization, and remaining energy leads to a further increase the temperature of water vaporization.
So when you are giving the laser pulse to the tissue, 3 steps are happening. So the first step is that you need to generate the heat so that it goes up to 100 Celsius degree. Once the temperature is reaching to 100 Celsius degree, then that is the water vaporizing temperature, right? And then the water starts to boil, which means the change from the liquid to the gas state. We call that as a vaporization. But for the vaporization, it requires also extra energy. Once all the waters are vaporized, and then if you still have a more energy left, then it can heat tissue more, so that there will be a further increase of the temperature after water has been all vaporized. So we need to consider those 3 steps and then estimate the change. So step 1, when the laser is coming to the tissue, and then those laser energy will be observed by the tissue. And then starting temperature is 37 Celsius degree for the core. However, maybe skin is actually lower than 37. So first, the step, the laser energy observed by the tissue here will be used to increase temperature from 37 to 100 Celsius degree. And then we can use the previous equation that how much of the energy is required to increase temperature. So here we have a M as a mass. And then also we assume that the major component in the tissue that absorb light energy is water. So that's why we have a M as a 8 times 10 to minus 10 gram, which came from this process. And the C is heat capacity. And the heat capacity of the water is known as a 4.3, and then kilojoule per kilogram and Celsius degree, and then delta T. So from 37 to the 100 Celsius degree, the difference is 63 Celsius degree. So by multiplying those, the final answer is 2.2 times 10 to minus 7 joule. When you're calculating this, you need to be a little bit careful about the unit, because here you have a gram, here you have a kilogram. You need to match between those two. So either you can hear as a 1000 gram like that, which is the 10 to 3, and then you can actually have a 10 to minus 13 gram. And then Celsius will be canceled out. And then leftover will be having a kilojoule, and the kilojoule is 10 to 3 joule. So actually the kilo cancel, so that this will be still minus 10. And then basically we multiply 8 times 4.3 times 63. They will give about 2,200. And then you have a 10 to minus 10. So you have a 10 to minus 7 joule here. So this is the energy required for the water amount of 8 times 10 to minus 10 gram to increase temperature from 37 to 100 Celsius degree in terms of the water. So second step is vaporization. So even though temperature has been risen to 100 Celsius degree, but that's still water, the liquid phase. And for the water needs to be vaporized. And then for the vaporization, that follows another energy. So Q vaporization, multiply with the mass of the water. Water is this, and then the vaporization energy is this one. So to vaporize the 1 kilogram of the water, you need to have 2,253 kilojoule. In other words, 1 gram of the water to be vaporized, you need to have a 2,253 joule of the energy. So if you multiply between those two, then the answer is 1.8 times 10 to minus 6 joule. So those two are necessary if you are going to make water in the tissue with a volume of 1000 micrometer cube to be vaporized. So the next step is, once it is vaporized, what will be the final temperature? So to estimate this one, we need to first look at how much of the energy will be left, even after going through step 1, step 2. Since we had a total of 3 microjoule of the energy to be applied, or actually to be observed. That is also important. So observed energy is 3 micrometer by the tissue. And then we need to subtract step 1, step 2 energy. Left over is 0.98 microjoule. So that means if you did not have 3 microjoule, if you just had maybe 2.12 microjoule, then those energy was just enough to increase temperature to 100 Celsius degree, and then to make the vaporization of the water. And then that's it, no more increased temperature. However, in this case, you have an extra energy left. So final temperature can be estimated. So the final temperature will be, at this moment, after step 2, the temperature is already 160 degrees. And then from this equation, so Q is MC delta T. So delta T is Q over MC. So Q3 is 0.98 microjoule, and then M, mass of the water, and then C is heat capacity of the water. So by looking at this, the delta T is 185. And then the final answer is 385 Celsius degree. So this one is 0.22 microjoule, and this one is 1.8 microjoule. So if you're adding these together, that's 2.02 microjoule. So not 2.12, 2.02. And then here is 1.98. So you need to look at actually the number here. So with the same amount of water, increasing the water temperature from 37 to the 100 Celsius degree, it requires 0.22 microjoule, which is kind of small. But if you want to make the water to transform from the liquid to the gas, it takes 1.8, which is almost 9 times higher energy required. And then if you have a further increase of temperature to the even 185 Celsius degree, you just need to have about 1 microjoule. So what does that mean? So it means that the water in tissue is a great reservoir of keeping or observing temperature. So without having the water, let's say, in here, you can just imagine that if there's no water, and if you give a 3 microjoule as energy, then you need to cancel this process, right? Then the temperature will be, can you imagine how much? So simply, you can have a 3 microjoule divided by those, which is 3 times, and then there will be like 285 multiplied with the 3. So that's about 800 Celsius degree. So with the 3 microjoule, you can increase 800 plus 37. So it will be about 837 Celsius degree. It's a huge, it's so high temperature. But because there is water in the tissue, and then it takes so much energy for the water to be vaporized, so that it can minimize the temperature increase in the tissue when you're giving the laser. So this example is basically very good examples of when you are using the laser, so that there is many things that we can do. So we can modify the pulse energy here, and we can modify the water percent. And then you can estimate what will be the final temperature. And also, maybe I can also ask, or I can give another parameter, such as that here, the pulse energy is basically observed energy by the tissue. But if I'm giving like mu A as another parameter, and then with let's say 10 microjoule, and then with the absorption coefficient by the tissue, then you can also use the another value as a observed pulse energy, and then you need to estimate what will be the final temperature. So these 3 steps are important. This line is representing irreversible tissue effect, which means that in this area, the effects on the tissue cannot be reversed, such as the coagulation or melting down or like that. So when you have a very short duration of the temperature, let's say 1 microsecond, even 70 Celsius degree can be okay. So you may, I don't know, have an experience that you have a candle, right? And then it has a light. And then you can actually sweep the kind of flame with your finger. Have you tried? No? So you can see that the candle light is actually having high temperature. It's more than 100, definitely. But just by having quick sweep using your finger, you don't actually have any damage on your finger. That's because it's so quick. Of course, if you keep your finger there for maybe 1 second, then you feel, oh my God, so hot. So same thing on here. Even like 70 Celsius degree, if you have a shorter than 1 second, then the tissue will not be damaged. But for the 50 Celsius degree, if you keep it for more than 100 Celsius a second, then it can be, your tissue can be damaged. Here. So I don't know, 1000 second is how many minutes? So 1000 divided by 360, 60
15
times
minutes.
60. So about 0.27. So 60 seconds. I cannot calculate somehow. Okay, it's about like 20 minutes. Here, about 20 minutes. I was just trying to look at the whether is it okay to keep our body in the hot tub with hot water. In general, if you go to the public, I don't know whether, I guess some of you don't have experience, but Korean people love to have a sauna, and then especially bathing in the hot water. So for those hot water temperature, some are like lower temperature is like 39, some are like 41 Celsius degree. And then the interesting point is that Korean people says that when you are going into the hot water, you say, ah, cool. You may not understand. So we should say, oh, it's so hot. But actually we say, oh, cool, like that. You can understand. But Korean people say like that. So I was looking at this one, 40 Celsius degree. So actually 40 Celsius degree, you can see, even though you stay there for more than like 1 hour, your body will not be damaged that much. So it's okay. You can have a hot water bathing. Anyway, so this is also important graph that there is a relationship between the how long you keep that temperature to be safe from the damage of the tissue. So even 50 Celsius degree, if you are keeping there for like 100 seconds, which is about like 2 minutes, then you can actually, the tissue can be damaged. And then Arrhenius equation is coming, and then that represents that basically estimating what will be the remaining active molecules or cells at the certain temperature level. So in other words, how much of the molecules or cells are going to be damaged at a certain temperature. And they can be shown as this natural log of the ratio. So C sub 0 is initial concentration, and then Ct is after time t, the survived percentage of that molecule or cells. And that follows the rate constant as omega. And then since that is the basic reduction from the C0, so you can see there is a negative sign here. And then where Chi estimated the constant value A can be estimated by using this equation. But later, not later actually, it's interesting. Johnson in 1974, I need to make sure about this one, whether this is the right number. Something is strange. This relation has no simple significance. So tissue damage degree as a D sub D can be estimated as how much are left from the initial condition. So they can be basically exponential of the constant value minus omega. But the question is that this omega is basically from this. And here, this Arrhenius constant value can be hard to be acquired. And also delta E, which is the activation energy for the reaction. They will be also depending on each molecule or cell. So that getting those two values are not actually very easy because of the tissues are not homogeneous. So here is some examples of that. For the retina, A value and delta E has been measured by those two groups, but also this retina value can be divided into when the temperature is lower than 50 Celsius degree, or when the temperature is higher than 50 Celsius degree, those values are different. And you can also see order difference is so much different as skin and liver. So basically, it's kind of hard to estimate. And the coincidence of the thermal effects. So thermal interaction happens when the power density is higher than 10 watts per centimeter square from the continuous wave, or when you are having pulse duration longer than about 1 microsecond. So with a continuous wave laser, if you have a lower than this energy density or power density, then thermal interaction may not occur. Or if you have a shorter than 1 microsecond as a pulse duration, then thermal interaction also may not occur. That is mainly due to the water thermal relaxation time is around 1 microsecond. So if you have a shorter than 1 microsecond, then the heat generated in the tissue by absorbing light energy even doesn't have a chance to transfer to the other area because of the pulse duration time was short. So ND-YAG laser or diode laser can be used to coagulate tissue, and the CO2 laser can be used to vaporize tissue or cutting the tissue by having thermal ablation. Also, if you are having wrong parameters when you are using the laser, it can actually cause the carbonization or melting the tissue. So when you are using the laser for the longer than 1 microsecond, it can cause the thermal interaction, but thermal interaction doesn't happen with only single effect. You have seen, depending on the temperature, coagulation and the vaporization, carbonization and the melting, those all different effects can happen at once when you are doing the thermal interaction of the tissue. So the carbonization can happen, and then or hyperthermia also can happen, but longer distance from the original light irradiated area. So the purpose is that we want to have only one specific effect occur. We just want to have a coagulation. We just want to have a hyperthermia, or we just want to have a carbonization we do not want to have actually. We just want to have a melting the temperature of tissue like that. But when you are giving the light laser irradiation to the tissue, those areas had a high enough energy so that they were vaporized or ablated. Ablation. But right next to the vaporized area, because of the high temperature, the carbonization can happen, and then surround that area, the coagulation happen, and after that you have also hyperthermia. So including this hyperthermia area, these are basically damaged or affected tissue by the laser pulse here. So if the purpose is giving ablation or vaporization, we just want to remove those tissue will be removed, but the other tissue to be saved. However, in this case, you can see that actually large tissue area can be damaged by the laser pulse here. So to minimize that damage by the thermal interaction, people were developing another technique, which is making the shorter pulse of the laser. So not microsecond, but in a nanosecond, picosecond scale. Right side is giving the examples of LITT, laser-induced thermal therapy. And you can see that there is optical fiber goes in, and then it is covered with a catheter. And then when you are turning on the laser light will be irradiated from the applicator. and then it can make the coagulating area, and then it can make a irreversible damage area, which is the yellow one, and then the green one is reversible damage. So for the hyperthermia, if you keep the time to be short, then those tissue can be reversed. However, for the coagulation, once coagulation happens, then there is no more going back to the normal state. So when there is a tumor, which has a blue color here, and then you place this applicator, and then you want to kill those tumor by having thermal effects, but you need to minimize those irreversible damage, which is the yellow color area, to be just enough to keep the to kill the tumors. So it's 10:20 already, and the LITT, actually you can probably read, and then there is no specific thing to hard to understand. Okay, so thank you so much, and then for attending class in a early morning, and then hope that this class made your brain to awake, so that now you can work better for the rest of the day. All right, then see you on Thursday, and then have a good day today.
Thank you, Professor.
Okay.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Professor.
Professor.